Hello! So hopefully this goes a bit better than it did yesterday when I discovered after filming for 20 minutes that I had no sound on the video. That was a great little surprise. What I'm going to talk about is stalled weight loss or plateaus and chiefly why they occur and then what you can do about them. So I'm going to break this down into 3 potential factors for you to be aware of, starting with the biggest factor and then working our way down in order of importance and magnitude of effect. So I've got my trusty whiteboard with me to help illustrate some of these points because it does get a bit numbersy because we're talking about calories and deficits and all that business. So number 1, the first thing we need to know is that if we're setting up a weight loss plan, we're building a calorie deficit through whatever means, whether it's increasing the amount of calories you burn over what you eat or reducing the amount of calories that you eat to a point where you're burning more than you're eating. Okay, so the less going in than you're burning off means you lose energy out of the system, you lose weight. So we call that daily energy expenditure, or DEE for short. There are 3 main factors that contribute towards your daily energy expenditure. They are your basal metabolic rate, which is the energy you expend doing nothing. If you lay flat out on the sofa all day and it's just your metabolic systems, your breathing, digestion, pumping blood around your body, that sort of stuff, that's your base metabolic rate. What that doesn't take into account is any activity that you do, such as standing, postural muscles, that needs a little bit of energy, whether it's walking to the shop, cleaning the house, doing the washing up, making the bed, brushing your teeth. Moving your body around is what we call NEAT, which stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Thermogenesis is just heat, energy that you use in doing something, in this case, non-exercise activity. So if we talk about NEAT, we're talking about moving yourself around but not exercising. And of course, that means the last contributing factor to the energy you expend is deliberately going out of your way to burn energy, exercise. So these are the 3 main ways that you're going to burn energy, and therefore the things that we can manipulate to set up a calorie deficit. Yeah. So we can't do an awful lot about BMR, but we could get you to increase your daily activity, couldn't we, through something like a Fitbit or a step tracker? Or we can increase your exercise. On the flip side of that, we can take away calories from your diet and leave this the same. So let's assume we've been doing that. We've set up a calorie deficit. You've been merrily following it for a couple of months and all is going well. In fact, you've done well and you've been losing weight. And then comes the point where the weight loss stalls and you aren't losing weight despite sticking to your diet. You're still exercising, you're still dieting. The same things that have lost you weight up until this point have now stopped working. Why do they stop working? That's what we're going to cover today. And we're going to cover it so that you don't worry when it happens and you don't panic or do something stupid like a juice cleanse and set yourself back. Okay, so the first thing we need to know is I'm going to talk about how dieting, weight loss affects your base metabolic rate. So I've covered this in another post, but this is how you estimate with a good certainty of being pretty close to the real number your base metabolic rate. Now, I've put the formula up for a female. There are slightly different numbers for any males who are doing this, but as I said, that's on another post in this group, so you can go and find that if you want that, or ask me in the comments and I'll direct you to it. So the formula is 3 different parts that contribute to the overall number, and I'll work you through these. So we have a constant, doesn't change ever, unless you're male or female, that's a different constant. In this bracket, 9.56 multiplied by your body weight, which means the more your body weight is, the higher that number's going to be, isn't it? Great, bear that in mind for later. Next bit, 1.9 multiplied by your height. Most people don't lose height when they diet, so that's going to be fairly constant. And unless your diet takes forever, this last one's going to be fairly constant because it's 4.7 multiplied by your age. So, looking back at this, let's get ourselves an example going so we can really visualize this. Losing weight reduces your BMR because your weight reduces. That's it. And I'll talk you through it. Let's say we have an 86 kilo female. She's 45 years old, 171 centimeters. She loses 10 kilos. So to begin with, 9.56 times 86 kilos. All these are constants. This is the important part, and it means 822 calories daily simply by virtue of her being 86 kilos. That comes out to an overall figure of 1,581 calories for her base metabolic rate. Now, after she's lost her 10 kilos, we're now multiplying the 9.56 by 76, not 86, which takes almost 100 calories off her base metabolic rate. Not because of any hormonal issue, not because of metabolic slowing or anything like that, simply because there is less of her to pump blood around, to get the oxygen around, to keep running. So her new base metabolic rate is 100 calories lower than it was before she lost the weight. With me? Here's where it gets interesting. Factor 2 in stalled weight loss, a subconscious reduction of NEAT. Now remember, NEAT was everything you do that is not exercise. So it's standing, it's brushing teeth, it's hoovering, it's all this business. Now, in an energy deficit, your body will quite normally and naturally look to preserve some of its energy by reducing its expenditure where it can, by becoming more efficient where it can. So, things like standing posture. You may use a little less energy in your standing posture. Slumping your shoulders ever so slightly. Reducing facial muscle tone ever so slightly. Taking easier options little by little. So, you may lean against something instead of standing tall whilst waiting for the bus maybe, or something like that. You know, very small factors that you wouldn't necessarily notice you're doing. It's not a drastic change, but add them up over the course of a day and it makes a difference. And this is why it makes a difference. So, if you did see my post on working out your daily energy expenditure, you'll have seen that once we'd worked out base metabolic rate using the formula that we've just been through, we then multiplied that by how active you were. Yeah? So, in my example of the 86 kilo lady, base metabolic rate 1581 calories, multiplied by a relatively inactive 1.25. This would be the sort of activity for someone who was relatively sedentary, maybe had an office job and walked a dog in the evening. Okay? So 1.25 times her base metabolic rate comes out with a daily energy expenditure estimate of 1,976 calories. Now, after she's lost weight, base metabolic rate is already reduced to 1,485. Subconsciously, she has reduced her NEAT. Maybe she has stopped moving around the office quite so frequently. She goes and gets fewer cups of coffee or glasses of water during the day. She might park a little closer to the door of the supermarket, and she may walk the dog just a little less far, cuts a few corners, that sort of thing. So we've reduced her multiplier to 1.18 to represent her reduced activity, which is the sort of thing you'd see on an activity tracker. You'd see that your normal average of 8,000 is now reduced to 7,000, 7,500, something like that. When we multiply the lower base metabolic rate by the lower multiplier, we get a substantially lower overall daily energy expenditure. At this point, combining the effects of factor 1, which was reduced base metabolic rate because of weight loss, and factor 2, which is subconscious reduction of NEAT, this lady is already 224 calories down on her pre-weight loss energy expenditure. Now remember, we set up a calorie deficit to enable her to do this. 224 calories could be a big chunk of her deficit, couldn't it? So just in these first two factors, we could have wiped out 2/3 of a 300 calorie deficit that was losing her a pound a week or so quite consistently before this effect kicked in. So nothing particularly nefarious, nothing has gone wrong. This is just what the body does. She now has a new maintenance, doesn't she? So she needs 1,752 calories to maintain her weight, whereas before she needed 1,976. Now, lastly, factor 3, and remember we're going in reduced importance, so greatest effect was base metabolic rate, then NEAT, and lastly, there are some hormonal and metabolic adaptations that take place as a result of a calorie deficit. These have a smaller effect than the previously mentioned factors, but it is still a factor. So, to illustrate this point, during a study in the 1940s called the Minnesota study, where conscientious objectors from World War II volunteered to be lab rats in a study on starvation and refeeding, with the aim of providing information on how to refeed starvation victims of World War II. A very noble thing that they did, but God, reading this study, didn't they go through the ringer? They were essentially starved for months, to the point where the most affected lost 40% of their daily energy expenditure, which is big, isn't it? In this example, it started 1,900 and something. They'd be down to 1,200-ish. That's a massive chunk of their metabolism cut. Now, 25% of that was because they lost so much weight. That is a lot. And 15% was this adaptive response, which includes NEAT reduction, subconscious energy reduction, and any hormonal effect. So we've already demonstrated how large the effect of NEAT is, which means that of that last 15%, there's not a lot left over for the hormonal effect, is there? So when everyone talks about metabolic damage and how their hormones are screwed up from dieting or yo-yo weight loss, there is a metabolic effect, but it is small. The bigger effect is you have lost weight, your NEAT is reduced, that's dramatically cutting into your daily energy expenditure. Does that make sense? I tell you this so that you don't worry that these hormone things, which are kind of beyond your immediate control without fancy supplements or whatever it is this person is selling you, and you can take ownership and start your weight loss moving again if you wish to. It's all stuff which is well within your control. And I'll tell you more about exactly how in a second. So what happens during this, during the Minnesota study, an example of the lengths they went to preserve energy and reduce their NEAT. The subjects were observed walking along the base where they were being studied. And rather than stepping down a curb at the end of the road where they wanted to cross it, they would shuffle their way down the closest dropped pavement, walk along in the gutter, and then once they crossed the road, walk along in the gutter until there was a dropped curb to walk back up, rather than step down a curb. That is an extreme example of the subconscious lengths people will go to preserve NEAT when in a ridiculous calorie deficit. Just wanted to get that little anecdote in there because I think that's pretty extreme. Hormonal effects of a weight loss diet, of a calorie deficit, a sustained calorie deficit. There is an increase in the appetite hormone ghrelin. There is a concurrent decrease in the satiety hormone, the fullness hormone. Hang on, leptin. No, I nearly forgot it. So the hormone that makes you feel hungry produces that empty feeling in your stomach. That is increased a little. The hormone that makes you feel full when you have eaten, that is reduced a little. So this is your body's way of trying to get you to eat more and re-establish calorie balance, isn't it? It's saying you're a little hungrier than normal, and it's taking you a little longer, a little more food to get full than normal. There's an increase in stress hormone. There's an increase in muscular efficiency, so you get better at doing things. You use less energy to do things. Again, this is this neat thing, isn't it? And there's a decrease in muscle tone. So when I was talking about energy expended for posture, decrease in muscle tone, you're using less energy for facial tone, posture, that sort of thing. So whilst there is a hormonal effect, it is relatively small. It is relatively small, and you can reverse it almost entirely back to normal with as little as a week of eating at your maintenance calories. So for our example lady, once she had lost weight down to 76 kilos, her new daily energy expenditure was something like 1,700 and something calories, wasn't it? So if she eats at that point for a couple of weeks, then she will obliterate any hormonal adaptations. And then if we re-establish a new calorie deficit for her, she will continue to lose weight. Okay, so these are the three major factors that produce a weight loss stall. If it's something that you've had happen to you, then I would suggest that the first two factors are the place to look primarily before getting unduly worried about the hormonal adaptation stuff. Okay, I hope that's helped. If anyone has any questions or queries, you can put them in the comments or personal message them to me, and I'll be happy to talk you through how you might apply this to you or any queries you might have about the whole thing. I hope that's been helpful, and I really hope the sound worked this time. See you all soon. Bye.